set up industry days and so that they can come and tour the facility and look for internships for less dangerous jobs and things like that. And so 30 seconds before he walks in, there's blood running down my face. I was like, yeah, I just need 2 minutes. If you could I need to get some liquid Band-Aid and some Styptic pencil and...
CJ, you should have leaned into it and blackened a tooth.
Right,
put
exactly.
a bandage on your cheek.
In other, I guess, accident news, the DJI Fetch is okay. If anybody's wondering, if anybody was watching Saturday when my dog decided that she was going to hop into my demo, and grab and snatch the drone out of the air, it works fine. And let me tell you, being able to launch the thing from your hand changes your relationship with the thing. Like, I walk into an area where it's messy, it's dirty. I don't want to put the drone on the ground and kick up all that dust. But being able to take off and land just wherever I happen to be was really cool. Like, I was able to put it in places that I normally wouldn't be able to get to. And just being able to hit, okay, give me a 9x9 panorama or give me a 3 high by 7 wide panorama, and just to have the gimbal do that work for you. I mean, we got some really just awesome stuff.
Yeah, but in defense of your dog, you said fetch repeatedly, and then something leapt out of your hand. So,
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd give the dog a small medal for awareness and protection. I mean, he didn't know if you weren't under attack. Good dog.
And then all the leaves are down in the backyard, so I was trying to see.
Is the sky gray, though?
I was trying to see what's in there.
It's Ohio. It's always gray.
Ohio. Yeah,
this reminds me of my youth.
Yeah, what I'm interested is in this guy. What do you got in this shed over here? Like, what's going on? This is way back.
Not a drone, buddy.
You're
Go
in
find
a
out.
rural area. Somebody's got a shed out back. You don't go on the property.
That's awesome. Ooh. I should put up the teleprompter app that Bill recommended to me because we are close to the top of the hour. 10, 20.
That little stupid teleprompter app that was cheap has been really solid for me. I'm surprised.
It's really great. I love
it's
it.
still working fine. It's no frills.
I can tell nobody's worked on it in a number of years, but it's okay. It does the thing.
That's because they
does
followed
what its
every
title
guideline. Yeah. Well, maybe the Pro is stretching a little bit because it doesn't have Pro prompter features, but it's a good solid single-person prompter.
And Jason, you're reading today?
I am indeed.
Awesome, double. This is like, I don't think I've ever hosted a Thursday before. I've got Alex Knight, Bill Davis, both on the panel, and neither are reading. It's just I feel very off.
Somehow I think you'll be fine.
We'll figure it out.
Just don't touch any TVs in the next 50 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. My wife's like, "Do you want to put foundation or something on that?" I said, "Nah, that's fine."
No, it's a good story.
It's a good story. Means I'm working.
Testing gravity.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Jason, let's jump right into the first one.
Talk Dorje writes in, greetings, I've been asked to help live stream a soccer tournament in a Tibetan settlement in South India. They have good internet, but no cameras. I suggested using Switcher Studio since iPads and iPhones are available. Suggestions? Thanks.
Well, Fudgeduck, I don't have direct experience with the Switcher app, but my first inclination is to, even though you might be in a less contested wireless environment than we might see if you were at a conference center or something like that, I still wouldn't want to depend on wireless or Wi-Fi for connection to the cameras. So if you have something like the Blackmagic app, the Blackmagic camera app, you can get it on an iPhone and on an iPad, and you can go in there and you can toggle the HDMI out to be clean video feed. And then if you get an adapter that goes from USB-C or Lightning to HDMI, they do still exist. I have a couple of them laying around. Then what you have is you have a wired connection that's going from the device back to wherever you're switching. And maybe you can, if you have access to some sort of switcher, that would be really helpful. Where I start to struggle a little bit is because it's a soccer event and that tends to be really wide, and you're not going to have a lot of ability to zoom, you're going to be at the outer reaches of where you can reliably go with HDMI before you're going to start to get signal degradation. Really, I wouldn't feel comfortable over 50 feet. I pushed it to 100 feet at during the Eclipse coverage just as a test, but it was iffy. Jason, what do you think?
If they are pushing, if your client is suggesting this, I would, the way to handle this is to say, look, this is what, might happen. And, this is what, this is the experience that we might have dropouts. We might not be able to recover the stream if we end up encountering any sort of interference, et cetera, et cetera. And that way, if they're like, well, it's okay because it's what we have, then, go for it. But that actually, in some ways, this kind of constraint can allow you to look like an expert straight out the gate.
And definitely setting realistic expectations in any production isn't only important for you covering yourself to make sure that people aren't thinking that, okay, I've asked you a slightly stretching the limits of physics question or slightly under-resourced set of tools to accomplish the goal that I'm trying to accomplish. Warning them and having a brutal facts conversation about exactly what can happen is going to go a long way, not only to helping them maybe get creative and think of other ways or to get to the finish line or to give you more resources, but it also is going to make sure that you're establishing yourself as somebody you can see around that corner. So let us know how it goes. Next question.
Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts asks, suggestions for how to record audio out of an Apollo Twin X. I prefer hardware solutions if possible.
Alex?
Yeah, there's lots of ways to go about this, and I get that you like hardware. Just so you know, with the Apollos, they do give you a digital audio workstation for free. It's called Luna. It's their own digital audio workstation. It's a pretty cool piece of software, but if you have to go hardware, all you need to do is basically take a pair of TRS balanced patch cables, quarter-inch patch cables, out of the back of the Apollo. Now, if you look at the back of the Apollo, which I'll show you here before we get to our recording solutions, you've got two sets of outputs. So you got your monitor outputs and then an additional pair of line outputs. So if you have powered studio monitors connected to your monitor outs, you're going to want to use the line out. Then you'll need the console software on the computer to route the audio. And you can, of course, route whatever mix you want can come out of here. And this would just be a stereo 2-track, recording there. And of course, you can use any piece of hardware. So as far as recording is concerned, if you want something small and portable, I don't know what your budget is. You didn't specify. So Tascam Portacapture X6, it's a 32-bit float recorder, pretty high quality, and you can go XLR in. to this and set it to line level as well. If you want something rack mount, they have these more expensive recorders as well, and these ones have SD card slots on it, and they have multiple SD card slots, so you can have redundancy for recording, and all the balanced XLR jacks are on the back here. So there's a bunch of different options there, network controllable as well. So again, what exactly are you doing with this? Don't know the budget, but if you want to provide us some little more information, probably give you a few more suggestions as well.
Bill?
Everything he said is accurate. The only thing I would note is that most people nowadays who are recording audio are doing so and then trying to remain in the digital domain and go into a laptop or something like that rather than an analog signal pathway. These units, and I'm sitting here talking to you through a Universal Audio Apollo Solo right now, and it comes in two flavors, Thunderbolt and USB. So either of those will get the digital signal out of that. You can patch it into any software you want on the computer. All the digital recording software suites work with this. And so for most people nowadays who just simply want to record an audio signal into their computer, they're doing it that way rather than going the kind of traditional circuitry, although there's plenty of use cases where you want to stick with that kind of thing. So you might be more comfortable with that. But I would caution you to pay attention to the digital solutions because most audio is now being processed that way, I would guess.
And Mickey McAchore in the chat is chiming in, saying to route your line outputs to 3 and or 4 using the console and connect those to a hardware recorder. And if you're using your Rodecaster Pro 2, you can use that as a hardware recorder. And he +1'd Bill's comment about staying digital once it's digital. That way you're not having a bunch of A to D conversions that can potentially degrade your signal quality. Next question.
David Brady in New York, New York asks, I found an interactive CD, think Encarta era technology, that I'd like to revive. Short of building a period-accurate computer, would something like this be able to be viewed in emulation like Wine or Parallels?
Go ahead, Alexander.
Well, yeah, you can. I wouldn't build a computer, but I mean, you can buy old PCs that are still functional. I wouldn't really bother going that route. What I would suggest you do is run Windows 98, which is very likely, well, that's from that era. So Windows 98 inside of a virtualized environment. It could be Parallels, although I've heard Parallels has problems with older operating systems. Just in my quick cursory search here, I did discover VirtualBox, which is actually an open source solution. It's like Parallels, but it's free, basically. This person has a very detailed article. I'll post a link in the chat here. But if you just Google Windows 98 VirtualBox, he's got a very detailed article about how he was able to get it working. And there's a Windows 98 images, drivers, and programs zip file there, and a bunch of people reporting that it works properly. So there's a bit of work involved. It looks like getting it working reliably inside of a modern virtualized environment, but it is possible, and it's much cheaper than trying to find an old PC that may or may not work.
Go ahead, Bill.
I would also look around on the let's not call it the dark web. Let's call it the slightly gray web. And I imagine somebody might have done an emulation of Encarta that's sitting on a website somewhere where you can access the whole thing. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I know people who love old content sometimes have full-blown emulations somewhere hiding on the web that you can play with.
Jason?
One of the things that drives a lot of people crazy about Microsoft is that their backwards compatibility is staggering. Like, no joke, you can execute 16-bit code on Windows 11. And the way to do that is to go into compatibility mode on the executable file. But the first thing you need to do is go to Ninite.com and download image burn, IMG burn. That will let you create an ISO file of your CD. From there, you get an app called WinCD-EMU or some such thing, and mount that as a virtual drive. From there, it's just a matter of figuring out the exec file, right-click on it, go to Properties, and then basically Legacy Emulation Boot. And you should actually be able to run it natively in Windows unless you have some really strange dependencies.
Now, I know you said Encarta. And I know Encarta was a Microsoft thing, but you sparked a memory of back when the Mac used to ship with the World Book encyclopedia on a CD. And when I was little, I remember just spending hours and hours and hours pouring through all the pages and learning about different countries and different cultures and different animals. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And that made me think of a great website for if it is a Mac software, or if you're interested in retro Mac software. There's a great website called Macintosh Garden, and this has an amazing amount of abandonware that you can download and play with. So if you want to see what Photoshop 2 was like, or you want to see what where in the world is Carmen Sandiego, or whatever your old software of choice
play
is.
Zork 1.
And then you can actually pair that with a software emulation online with something. I know there must be this sort of thing for Windows as well, but there's also a website called infinitemac.com, which allows you to emulate all the way back to System 1, and even some of the next step operating systems, some of those older pieces of software. And it's amazing the creativity that these engineers had to make the software in as compact with the constraints that they had at the time. But you can literally run it in the browser, and it operates just like if you want to go in and remember what Apple Talk and the chooser looked like, you can get all excited about that. But when you're doing the customization, you can actually choose to have either a physical drive, or if you have an ISO of a CD, that ISO file uploaded to one of these emulation websites, and it will mount as if it were one of those external drives. So it's not going to help you if you lost your Mac OS 9 resource forks when you migrated to a new file system, and now the little files don't know what program they belong to anymore. But if you have older software that you're trying to run, take a look at those online emulators, because I find that they're, for the amount of, the nostalgia hit that I get from it, is nice. It's not worth, I'm going to open up a Basilisk or a Sheep Shaver or stand on my head to get that Oracle VirtualBox working, because I've done all those things and I just found that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, to put it in a way. Hey, your questions and votes drive the show. So remember, you can use Makana, our system, to chat, ask questions, vote on the questions. And if you don't have access, you can sign up at officehours.global/join. And then if you sign up there, you'll get an email with links for how to get into that system, but also our Discord and a lot of good behind-the-scenes stuff here at Office Hours. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, for an audio person entering the world of video, would the Sony Z200 be a solid choice for a first professional camera?
Alexander?
I looked at this camera because I haven't heard of it, and the one we're talking about is, I think it's this one here. It's the only one with that model number that I could find. And what's the use case, Douglas? It depends what you're trying to do. For run and gun stuff, that type of format, it's pretty good with the top handle. But the problem is that these things have pretty small sensors, and they have fixed lenses, although it does have a nice long zoom on it. So could be good, but it depends on what your use case is. If you want better image quality, you're probably going to want a Super 35 or something close to that type of sensor. Like even on the budget side of things from Sony, the ZVE 10 Mark II, which is an APS-C sensor, which is pretty close to, I think, the Super 35, whatever one is on the FX30. You do have to be careful about overheating with those, but if you want to get into shooting stuff, those are pretty affordable, although the FX30 is a big step up. The nice thing about the FX30 is because it's designed specifically for video, you can add all sorts of accessories like the Sony XLR digital hot shoe accessory. So you can get nice professional audio into that thing with, if you have any microphone lying around that has a balanced XLR jack, you can get audio into that. And they don't overheat like the cheaper Sonys. So that might be something to think about.
Bill?
I'd say it'd be absolutely fine. You may be actually buying more camcorder, because that's basically what this is, than you might be useful to you. The reason I say that is because since you've been an audio person and you want to get into video, there's so much in terms of the language of video that you need to learn. camera operation is a art in itself. So things like getting a decent tripod and learning how to do pans, zooms, tilts, all the rest of the things that's part of the language of visual communication with moving pictures is something that took me a decade to really feel like I got my head around. And literally any camera that you can shoot footage on, review that footage, edit that footage, and turn it into communication programs for the outside world will do a really good job of helping you climb that ladder. It's not necessarily about the device you're doing it on, in my opinion. It's about learning the skills, learning what frame a good shot as opposed to a bad shot. What is an acceptable move as opposed to an unacceptable move? When you get frustrated with the first tripod you try, this was my path anyway, I asked myself, why am I frustrated? Why can't I do what I see on TV? And I realized that my hardware supporting my camera wasn't good enough to allow me to do the kinds of things I saw on TV. And I had to pay more money to get better support for the camera to be able to execute those kind of serious moves. Now, of course, also, you're split because we've got drones and sliders and jibs and everything that was really expensive when I started. And I do see a lot of young people kind of skipping over the basic language of camera operation, and let alone all the internal things like iris setting and ISO, and what do those mean for the content that comes out on the other side. So what I'm trying to say, long-winded, excuse me, is that with a camcorder like this, you've got tons, years, maybe decades of learning ahead of you. Not that this is going to be your final camera, but that you're enabled to go out and start learning how to do the work that can make you good at camera operation. And that's your first jump up. So I'm not sure that the camera you pick is all that big a deal. But if you like doing this, if you think you want to get into video, I'd get something and get out there and start shooting.
I definitely agree with what Bill said about learning kind of and I think Danny Grizzle put in the chat, the visual grammar of how to communicate, your idea or your story with the pictures. I also agree with Alexander that you're making a lot of compromises in sensor size, in not having the ability to change lenses, that when you look at that price tag of almost $4,000, you're compromising a lot to spend that much. If I had a budget of $4,000 for a camera, what I would more likely do is something like Alexander said, go to something with a Super 35 sensor like the ZV-E10 or the FX30, or maybe go up to something full frame like the FX3. Now, if I went to the full frame FX3, I've just blown my $4,000 camera budget and I don't have a lens. The other thing that I'm giving up when I go to one of those mirrorless style form factors is that it's not made like a video camera. It's in a still form factor. And so to get to all the settings and to get to all the buttons, it doesn't lend itself as much to kind of that run and gun nature that something like one of these camcorders. But if you need 12G SDI and you need HDMI and you need it to be able to stream directly over Wi-Fi and you need an electronic viewfinder and you need the dual SD card or dual CF card, I'm not sure what it takes recording, and those things are specifically to your use case, then this might be the ticket. If you even the FX30, I believe, comes with a little handle grip so that you can get XLRs in. But really, this to me is more of an ENG camera, and this is something that you're going to want to throw in the bag, take out with you. It's compact. You're going to have a power zoom, and it's a run and gun ENG camera. If you're trying to get into telling a story, then you want to think about something with larger sensors, with interchangeable lenses. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I want to support what CJ just said about ENG versus EFP, which are the two kind of mindsets that you have to decide upon when you go out. ENG, electronic news gathering, means I'm going to go out into the real world and I'm going to watch things happening in real time, and I'm going to tell a story based on those things happening in real time. That's why they called it news gathering. This is the traditional news shooter that would go to an event, whether it was a press conference or an accident or whatever, document the story, come back and edit and tell the story. The other big division is EFP, or electronic field production, and that is more like we're going to shoot a movie. We have a script, we're going to follow it, we're going to go set up our shots, and in each case we're going to execute the shots either to the storyboard or to a vision such that we have more control over what's in front of the camera for each of those. This kind of camera would, I think, lend itself more to ENG type filmmaking than it would EFP type filmmaking. Not that you couldn't do both kinds. You certainly can. But this kind of thing is designed so that you have dedicated buttons for everything. You don't have to go into menus. If you're facing something and the lights get too bright, you should have an iris control on this where you can hit a button and dial down your iris so that you have less light coming through the lens. Those kind of things are what live shooters for ENG style need and require, and that's just a different thing. So, kind of decide where your interests lie, and that'll tell you whether this or one of the more DSLR style camcorders, which are better when you have more time to set up a shot and execute a shot than they do if you're just pacing changing conditions.
Last thing I'll say to put a bow on this is that if you're going to spend money on a camera that's just for getting started, unless you're rolling in dough, I wouldn't spend $4,000 just to get started and to learn what you like and learn what you don't like. I would try and find something used, try and rent something, and experiment a little bit to say, okay, for the mission that I'm trying to achieve, what's the tool set that I really like? Hey, just so you know, we've got evening shows for you to watch live or later. Monday, we had extra hours at 6 p.m., and today at 6 p.m. Pacific, we've got The Rundown with David Paskin. But you can check that out on the YouTube Live. Next question.
Paul Wall, who's in Austin, Texas, writes in tips on transferring a native Zoom recording to YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Alexander?
Yeah, so last time I checked, the Zoom, I'm not sure what you mean, Paul, by native, because I'm pretty sure the Zoom recordings are H.264 encoded inside of a .mp4 container file. That'll upload straight to YouTube. It'll upload to LinkedIn, Facebook. You shouldn't have any issues there at all with that. So unless someone can correct me that they've changed it somehow recently, that's what they use.
I would just worry about record quality. If you're recording, whether it's Zoom Local or Zoom Cloud, you're gonna get a pretty compressed image, because if you think about the amount of video that they're having to store and the amount of people who are recording, well, they're charging you for it if it's in the cloud, but they're trying to keep that to a pretty compact format. You might be better served by something like a Zoom ISO and recording the meeting to a hardware device so that you have the better quality. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah. So depending upon how your settings are configured in Zoom, if you go into settings and then go to the recording tab, there is actually an option, because by default, Zoom uses their own, it's probably not proprietary, but it's not easily uploadable video format. And what you need to do is choose optimize for third-party video editor. That is going to make your upload significantly easier, and you're not going to have to do any transcoding in the interim.
Oh, thanks, Jason. I missed that one. Next question.
Poonsok Dorje writes in, hi, panelists. What are the most compelling reasons to invest in Blackmagic Design switcher with 2 mix effects MEs? And in what types of productions does this added capability provide the most value? Thanks.
I would say as you're getting into more complex productions where you're going to have potentially multiple super sources that you're cutting between, that's the first thing that I go to, because if you're in a 1ME switcher, like even the A10 minis are really 1ME switchers, you're limited to just that one. And I've even known people I've done this where I don't have a 2ME switcher, but I started with an A10 mini, just Pro ISO, and then I went to the Extreme, and now I use the Mini sometimes as a second ME, so I can kind of build a whole nother thing in there. But it's really for more complex productions. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was going to say, basically, if you're thinking about a switcher, what you're thinking about is live sending a signal out. That's really where switchers shine, whether it's switching a television program or building a web show or something like that. the ability to live execute multiple camera feeds and do things like the super sources and attribution stripes and things like that, that becomes really important for that. If you're just creating programs, you're probably not going to want to run through this. And for most of us who are doing something like office hours, I've got a very basic ATEM Mini here, which takes care of everything I need. I just need to be able to switch to a couple of other shots occasionally. I have multiple cameras here that I can switch to for an overhead look or something like that. So those are what switchers excel in. So it just depends on the kind of work. I mean, what's the show that you're trying to execute? And if you're trying to execute a show that has those facets, something live to the web or live to the air, switchers are a massively powerful tool.
Alexander?
Yeah, so if I were to start again, those are all good points. But one of the things that I don't like is lots of cables hanging off the back of a piece of gear. So one of the nice things about the 2ME and those types of devices is that they are rack mount. So all your I/Os at the back. So you've got SDI. So if I were to do it again, that's one thing that would really clean up my studio. And then I would probably just get the control surface because then you just have a single Ethernet cord, and then you can control it. Like if you still want physical controls, of course you can control it with software. But if you still like physical controls, having a control surface with just a single network cable, I mean, man, that just is beautiful, and that just really cleans things up in the studio.
And then Mickey brought up in the chat that if you're going to the bigger switchers, although they might not be as inexpensive, if you're trying to build a studio around it, you may consider looking at the other manufacturers besides Blackmagic, like somebody from Ross Video. Just remember that when they'll probably call it a multi-box and not a super source because that's Blackmagic terms. Next question.
David Brady in New York, writes in, has anyone used Top Director NDI Monitor Pro scopes? Wondering if it's worth the $10 investment, and he includes a link from Top Director.
All right, David, I missed this one. I didn't bring it up yet. I have not looked at this, but here is your, this is what he's talking about here. This is the Top Director 9 NDI multi-view PTV scopes record, and I don't know if I'm blocking their website or if that thing's just not coming up. But basically what you've got coming in is the ability to receive an NDI signal into an iOS device or monitor an NDI signal with an iOS device and just see what your levels are. I've used things, and I know that something like Nobe Omniscope will also support an NDI source, I believe. And there was another question here about scopes as well. It's just invaluable to have objective, just numerical, quantitative data about exactly what sort of signal that you're sending through. And if something's $10 that might do that, I would buy it just to see if it works. Bill Davis?
That's about what I was going to say. I was going to say it's $10. If you think by any, I would go online and look at reviews. If it has more than 1,000 positive reviews, you know it's not just a scam for your money, or they've got a really good bot farm working. But if it's a legit product, what's the downside of skipping a couple of lattes in favor of bringing this in and seeing if it does any jobs for you?
Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin asks, I have an old 2012 MacBook Pro with a stock DVD in the drive. It won't come out whatever I try. Any ideas on how to retrieve the DVD without breaking the drive or the disk?
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay. I assume you've tried holding the eject key, dragging the thing, right-clicking on the disk icon. So I'm going to give you a little bit more powerful stuff. You can type into the terminal /usr/bin/drutil _eject. That is a command level eject. Now, if you hear it try to eject and it just never comes out, this is where it gets real interesting. I would get hemostats or a spudger, and I would put felt on it so that you don't damage the disk. Chances are the disk is ever so slightly up or down, and it's the body of the MacBook that is preventing it from ejecting. So what you really need to do is this may take two people, but you need one person who's kind of manning, right at the slot, and then the other person, when the when the MacBook is booting, you hold down the trackpad button. That will force the eject once the desktop appears. And the second you start hearing it try to eject, you need to just basically get the spudger on top or below the disk to to basically align it correctly to get it out of the slot.
Alex Knight.
Okay, so I know we've all not had optical drives in a while. We've probably forgotten about this, but drives, and I bet it's possible, I don't know if it has this. So, it's a Mac, so it probably doesn't have this. So PC drives, because I used to be a PC user, they would have this tiny little pinhole where you could stick a paper clip in. It's an emergency eject button. And that would, as soon as you push that in, that tray would come out. So on a Mac, I just realized that I ruined my answer because it's a Mac and it doesn't have that. So you're going to have to break out the hammer and a drill, and you're just going to have to completely dismantle that computer. I apologize for that. But
at least it's from
inside
2012, so there's no warranty left.
The Mac,
matter at this point.
Since I want to say the titanium PowerBook G4, the Mac laptops have used although maybe the iBooks, some of them may have used a slot loading drive, but most of them, most of them are a slot loading drive, not a tray. So it's not anything that you can open up or try and force out. Now, early on, I don't know if they were still doing this in 2012 because that was the last generation that was the unibody design. But it was the last generation before the Retina came out, because that would have been that might have been 2013 or 2014. But yeah, it was the last generation before the Retina came out, and that eliminated the disk drive. Yes, so that's what it was. Some of them still had a emergency button at either the extreme left or the extreme right of that slot, where if you were to take something like a paperclip or a SIM ejector tool and depress a button, that it would come out. But otherwise, I think I'm with Jason. I would use something like a spudger or maybe even a credit card or a business card and just try to listen and say, okay, is that drive trying to spin up? Does it sound like it's stuck at all? Is it totally dead? And then kind of go in and try to get under it or get over it and see, is there some sort of, was it in a bag and it got crushed a little bit and now there's a piece that is physically preventing that from coming out? And then Jesse Castor actually came in and said another thing that he's had success with is putting tape onto the outside of a credit card and trying to get in there and just grab it somehow. And if you don't care about the DVD and you just want to get rid of the computer and, tweezers, Jason.
Yeah, the last thing that I would say is that it is surprisingly easy as long as you're willing to take your time. Go to ifixit.com and you will have an incredible teardown guide. I mean, just down to remove the 3mm screw that is, on this circled macro picture. Once you've removed the DVD drive, it's a piece of cake to get it out because there is actually a hidden emergency on the slot loading drive, not the tray loading, because Apple's never had really a tray loading drive on a MacBook. But it's very, very easy. You can use the paperclip trick once you've removed the drive. So yeah, ifixit.com I think is your best friend here.
And what you really should do is just remove, like Jason said, remove the optical drive, but don't put it back in. Put an SSD module in there.
Yes.
And that way you're going to breathe some new life into that older computer and still be able to use it for something basic because it's going to have enough drive speed that the rest of the machine's going to keep up. And then after that, obliterate the optical drive. Get in there, get that. I don't know if you have a copy of something that's hard to find, but that's where I would go with that. We also have another way to ask questions. I should mention, you can ask questions 24/7 at askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. It's fast and easy. There's nothing to sign into, nothing to log in for, sign up for, log into. Anyway, we need your name, we need your question, and we'll work it in over the next couple shows, and that's at askofficehours.global. Next question.
Peter Rosado in Las Vegas, Nevada writes in for conversation, quote, flight risk, movie virtual filming, and includes a YouTube link.
So I didn't have time to watch the YouTube video. However, I did use this new thing on YouTube that is letting you ask about the video. So I'm going to interpolate a little bit here. And it looks like, I just said, hey, could you summarize this for me? And it says, okay, they shot this movie primarily with the Sony Venice, but there's an anecdote in here where the camera malfunctioned or the gimbal on the helicopter malfunctioned while they were trying to get one of the big shots. And so if you think about all of the people that are required to support that shot, from a crew perspective, from a talent perspective, how much money per minute you're burning, the fact that somebody's able to pull out something like the Ronin 4D and capture really great footage is pretty exciting. The other thing that they did as part of this is that they built, big LED volumes. And if you've watched any of the behind the scenes on The Mandalorian or others, recent productions, you know that, or if you walk down the halls at NAB, you just see these massive LED volumes to create these virtual sets. Well, and what's powerful, though, about what they're doing is they're actually doing motion tracking on the head of the camera and then having two things occur. Number one, only the part of the LED volume that is in frame, I'm imagining there's a little bit of a buffer too, but for the most part, only what's in frame is actually being rendered. And everything outside of that space is just kind of a lower resolution with a big blur on top of it. So that from a reflected light perspective, from an atmospheric lighting perspective, you're still looking, the actors still look correct and it looks believable. When a car passes by, you may see the car very sharp as it's behind the person, but as soon as that car goes out of frame, it's the lower res version to save on processing power, but the light from the headlights is still going across the performer's face. And I think that's when done right is a really, really amazing development in the last 5 or 10 years, and it's really cool to see it in person. I'll try to bring up something that I shot of what I'm just talking about at NEB while Bill's going. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I just took a look at the first maybe 2 minutes of it, and it is a big movie. This is a Mel Gibson directed thing. I think Mel's trying to rehabilitate his image in Hollywood, and they're throwing tons of money at this. This is as big a production, Hollywood soundstage kind of thing as I've seen in a long time. You're right, they're using a lot of digital effects, and they're trying to kind of push the outside edge, spending vast amounts of money. So really the question comes down to, is the traditional Hollywood studio movie system still going to reign supreme when it comes to box office, or are we going to see a change and we're less Hollywood blockbuster, big studio kinds of things and more independent things relying on scrappier, smaller teams? I think I'm leaning that the industry is headed a little bit on the second rather than the first. This kind of huge spend, and obviously based on what I saw with those crews, we're talking north of 100 million easily, and maybe double that, and maybe theoretically even triple that for the production of the film. And the question is, are they going to have a decent chance of recovery of that money and making a profit when you get up there? You know, we've seen so many of those big movies that are kind of famous for, they had a huge budget. You thought they had an audience that was locked in, but when it came time to tally up the final things, they were not successes. And I have no idea whether this is going to tap into the zeitgeist of travel people, because I think this has to do with some sort of a flight in jeopardy. But maybe people are ready to go back out to theaters for thrill rides, or maybe the back end of all the post-movie theater sales is so big now that they think this is a safe bet. I don't have an opinion on that. I just think it looks like they're spending a ton to make this movie.
If you want to take a peek at what the back of one of these things looks like, when you're at the back of one of these LED walls, it is just it is a maze of everything's interconnected. These are all the individual LED panels that are seamless when they go together. And then in the front side, you can see from this video that, okay, here's the camera, and what is in frame is kind of what I was talking about. What is in frame is in focus, and then out of focus is a lower resolution version that's just for atmospheric lighting. And they motion track it so that as that camera moves, what is in focus is moving to save on how much it's going to cost from a processor budget for one of these things. And you can see over here what is actually in frame. So there's quite a bit of buffer outside of exactly what it's shooting. But it's really amazing to see to see this evolve and not just be a, it's not a matte painting. It's a it's a truly dynamic set piece. Next question.
Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona asks, Checkin, has loopback gotten more dependable on Sequoia yet? I'm on 13.1 and hoping to be able to use it, but it was clashing with Microsoft Teams for me previously, rendering it unusable.
Mr. Beish.
Yes, it most certainly has. Loopback 2 is a complete rewrite from the bottom up. You don't have to go in and boot into safe mode and modify your system kernel and bind anything weird. My immediate first, second, and third thought is that does not necessarily mean that it will work with Teams, because Teams has not become more reliable or more useful in Sequoia or any other version of Mac OS. Not saying it's unusable, saying, of all the apps out there, if something's going to clash with any app under the sun, it's going to be Teams. Maybe I just have bad luck in that regard.
No, Microsoft just needs to pick one. I was helping out somebody was visiting the office, and they said, "Hey, you're in IT. Can you help me out here? I'm having some trouble with Teams." And I opened up the computer, and they had Teams running in the browser, and then in their dock they had Teams New and Teams Classic, and all three were running simultaneously. It's like, I'm getting so many
I wonder why I have an
notifications.
echo. Yeah,
I'm getting so many notifications. Everything is ringing, and I'm just like, I know it's painful, but just try and pick one. I know that they're fighting the support costs, and they're trying to make a bunch of decisions about, okay, if I discontinue this one thing, then all of the admins are going to start getting X amount of calls, so our supports are going to go way up. But yuck, it's not the best experience. That said, the biggest change that was made with loopback during this time is that they went from using their ACE plugin, which they'd used forever to capture the audio, and it was using I believe a kernel extension that Apple's trying to get rid of, and so that's why you had to restart and disable system integrity protection and do all this other stuff. They rewrote it, and now it's called ARK, and I apologize, I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but that has been more stable. The first version of it broke a ton of stuff, and I think stung us all in one way or the other, and made a lot of folks, once they had those scars, a little gun shy to go back. That said, I run it on all my machines all the time, and I have considerably, and this is my use case, I can't speak for everyone, but I personally have fewer core audio crashes since Sequoia and loopback using ARK than I did when it was using ACE. And I don't know if that's because of all of the other things that I have going on in my specific system, but I actually have found it to be pretty reliable. Coming up on office hours, we've got tomorrow is our Friday daily Q&A, but then the weekends are a little different. We've got our live only shows. I think they're members only shows. You should get jackets or something, but you got to be in Makana because those are live only. So if you go to officehours.global/join and you're into the Makana system, then you'll be able to view Saturday Q&A, which is just pretty much like this, but we try to get some new people on so that they can cut their teeth. But also Sunday is a totally different show because that's where we get a little bit more philosophical. You can ask questions about office hours, give us your joys and concerns, but also talk more philosophy about the industry, and it's a really good time. So I would highly recommend coming and hanging out with us on the weekends. Next question.
Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas writes in, what diagnostic tools have people found useful to help wrangle audio, video, and network? How do you like to use them? Zynaptiq's Spectre comes to mind.
Jason?
Yeah, Peter caught me doing some stuff before we went live, and I'll show this. This is mostly eye candy, but just to give you a sense of Spectre, all of this is one channel. It's just my voice. It's exactly what you're hearing. And it is, this is the one that I use to basically just show off how many different ways you can visualize audio. In truth, all you really need is that level meter, that LR at the very top center. But, as you can see right next to it, I've got surround, I've got a spectrograph, I've got a spectrogram, waveform meter, a split. This is a mono channel, but the stereo field actually looks really cool. When you actually have some stereo pan into the channels. It is an extremely cool app, and I do use it diagnostically. My primary use for it on this show is because it is so stinking compelling to show that, it really can look pretty and be useful to be able to have metering.
Well, and what is that? What is the price on that? I've never.
Both
tried
Alex and I bought it years before. Before I think you actually have to buy it. So Zynaptiq bought it, and let's see, technology licensing DSP. It is not inexpensive anymore. I got it for $100, I think, because I had a prior license. But it's not cheap.
Another one you can use for audio monitoring is there's a little program called Sonic Atom. It's from Loud Lab, the same people that make SoundDesk.
Yeah,
and
not quite as stable, but it's great.
That one works really well, and I find it a little less. Is the word exciting? My particular brand of attention deficit doesn't do well with all those colors, but I really dig it. I use it on the show to monitor my levels and to see what that's like. So you can do almost all of the different scopes, all the different audio scopes that Jason was just showing. But whoops, that's the wrong machine. But you can take a look at it. So this is while I'm speaking right now. You can see where I'm popping around and when I stop. And you have a lot of options also if you go into this. And I need to do this at one of these days, but you can actually set color scales so that you know just at a glance how much of your show is within the range that you're aiming for versus how much of it is too hot or too quiet. When you're looking at video, I know we've recommended a bunch of times on the show, but I can't tell you how much I love Nobe Omniscope for video monitoring. I can have it as an OpenFX plugin directly into DaVinci Resolve so I can see in real time what I'm doing in my timeline, but you get a lot more control and a lot more customization with those scopes than you do with the scopes that are built into Resolve. But also you can set it to any camera source. So when I'm trying to say, how's my exposure, how's my color balance, how is, if I'm trying to zero in, for instance, in this room, one of the things I wish I would have done differently is I wish I would have put cooler bricks in the background instead of the warm bricks, because you end up with a lot of those warm tones right where I'm trying to balance a skin tone. Nobe Omniscope, I can hold down the control key or the shift key and then drag a little highlight window over part of the screen. And I don't know, maybe I'm missing something in Resolve. I find it a lot easier to do a highlight and do a spot check on a specific part of the frame when I'm using Nobe Omniscope as opposed to the stuff that's built in to Resolve. So I can isolate just, this part of the frame right here, make sure that the skin tones are in line, that I like the exposure, and then keep on moving. It will warn you if you're using a Blackmagic switcher. Nobe is aware of the ATEM crush where it sends that compressed signal. So it actually makes you go into the settings and enable Blackmagic switchers over USB in order to use it. And it warns you like, hey, this is not recommended. It's not the most accurate. So, word of warning if you're in the Blackmagic ecosystem, but that's what I use for video. For network, this is kind of a three-tier question, but for network, I really like to use things like LANscan for the Mac. I like that it looks like a little duck in the dock. But when you open it up, you see all the devices on your network, all of the IP addresses, all the MAC addresses, the manufacturers. But then also it's just a column view. So I can sort, here are all the devices that are on my Wi-Fi network. I can do a search for a specific manufacturer. And just yesterday, I was using it because actually, and I know Lois has got a question coming up here, but weeks ago, she had recommended this BirdFi Wi-Fi bird feeder camera that'll detect what birds are at your bird feeder and, upload the little clips. And it was so cool. I started it up, joined the Wi-Fi. It got an IP address. The thing would not connect to the internet. And it was pulling my hair out, just trying to well, not that figuratively speaking, there's not any hair to pull out. But I'm trying to figure out why won't this thing connect to the internet? And then I opened up LANscan, found the IP address, and then I fired up my other favorite monitoring tool, Wireshark, to see exactly what were the protocols that it was trying to communicate with, what webs, because I was like, did I accidentally put the server that it's trying to talk to on a block list. Turned out it was a subnet issue where the BirdFi was expecting a very compact, simple network, and I gave it one that had a .4 and a .5, IP space on the same network, and it didn't know how to get to the internet. So I manually made a reservation, and Bob's your uncle or what have you. But if I wouldn't have had LAN-scan, wouldn't have had Wireshark, I wouldn't have been able to diagnose exactly what was going on my network, and then been able to move forward from there. Next question.
Lois Richter in Davis, California asks, I have an older iMac desktop computer that has been totally stripped. No OS. How do I get an older Mac OS onto this? I have an external CD drive.
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, Lois, I would never make you use an external CD drive to load an old version of Mac OS because that's an easy way to get stuff stuck, and no, bad idea. Okay, here's what you do. You connect that iMac directly into your router with Ethernet, and then it is Command-Option-R. You hold that at boot, and that will start net-based restore. No matter how old, maybe there's a cutoff somewhere, but I've yet to have a Mac that will not pull directly from Apple the version of Mac OS that iMac shipped with, and will install it clean and neat. From there, you can upgrade as far as you'd like, to the latest version that the hardware will support.
Bill?
I'd follow Jason's advice. That probably is going to be the quickest and easiest way. For me, I've always have a thumb drive around that's bootable as a USB temporary thing, and you can do target disk mode and either connect to another computer via Thunderbolt or whatever. Target disk mode is really nice because it boots from your regular computer, but it brings the other computer up with nothing on it, whatever it sees over there, including nothing, and then you can usually drag an operating system on it. But those thumb drives have always been useful for me if I'm trying to do something from scratch that has absolutely nothing on it. You can usually provision a computer with a basic operating system for that. But I'd try Jason's method first.
I know we have a loose definition of older in this case. So iMac, I guess, could go back to 1998 if there's one. I think I have a 98, an 05, and an 09 sitting back on the shelf there. One of them's quite stripped down. It doesn't even have a screen anymore. I was able to get, I wasn't able to do the internet restore in this machine because it was I think it was 09, and I needed Snow Leopard or something like that, and it wasn't connecting. So I had done what Bill did, created a bootable USB key, and then just held down the option key on startup, and then that presented an option of what to boot from. If it's more recent, I would say, in the last 10 years, you can probably boot it into a recovery partition. I don't know, there's a chance it's still on there. Even if the main volume was erased, it still may have the recovery partition. So if you boot the Mac up holding down Command-R, or Open Apple R if you're really old school, let's start up the Mac with Command-R, and then that'll boot it into recovery mode. If it's an M1 Mac, I don't think you consider that older, but in that case, you just hold down the power button until startup options load. A lot of times you can install right from that recovery partition a fresh copy of OS X directly onto whatever volume you like. So you've got target disk mode, internet recovery, bootable USB key, and recovery mode. Those are 4 ways that hopefully you can get that thing up and running again. Because you know what? They don't make Eric Solitaire anymore. It used to come with the Mac, and I like the little weasel that comes up on the screen, but
flex.
Delta Tau just does not make that software. If you're finding Office,
it's an old Mac, it doesn't even have the yak coming across the screen to tell you, teach you philosophy.
And if you try to quit, it's like, are you sure? If you're finding office hours valuable, if you're getting some value out of office hours, there's some way you can give value back. Of course, you can like and subscribe to the channel. That's an easy way. But we're also a nonprofit, so if you'd like to help keep the show going, go to officehours.global/donate. And finally, there's a ton of volunteer opportunities. Everybody involved in the community is a volunteer, and that's not only here on the panel and on the back end with the show, but also keeping everything organized. So lots of opportunities there. You can sign up at officehours.global/volunteer. Next question.
Marty Dickinson in Fairfield, Connecticut asks, continuing with my studio build, I am upgrading or updating an old MacBook Pro to a loaded MacBook Pro M4 Max. I also want to add a Mac Mini and or Mac Studio if new M4 comes out. Would this be for audio and video in-house? What are the panel's thoughts?
Speaking of flex, holy smokes, Alexander.
Yeah, the new M4 Mac Minis are awesome. Even in their base configuration, I use them. But I'm not working with raw video formats or 8K multiple timelines. So stepping up to a Mac Studio is great because, first of all, you don't get the same processor options that you would in the Mac Mini. So Apple's not going to put something like an Ultra chip, which would probably generate too much heat in that very small package. So if you need the most amount of power and the most amount of I/O and the most amount of memory, the Mac Studio would probably be the better option if you're going to have incredibly hard, heavy workflows. Like I said, you're working with raw formats, you're working with 8K video, that kind of stuff. Or maybe you're doing computationally expensive stuff like 3D rendering, that kind of stuff. And of course, we're still waiting for it. It hasn't shown up yet. The Mac Pro needs a refresh. We're still waiting for an M4 processor-based Mac Pro, so I'm sure that's coming eventually, and it'll be really interesting to see what Apple's going to do because that is the ultimate in the way of I/O expansion because you'll get a lot more Thunderbolt lanes.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm going to riff on what Alexander was just saying. I agree with him 100%. The tough thing here is you're not telling us what you're trying to do. So whether or not that hardware is optimized for the kinds of processes you're going to be running there. I mean, my concern has always been when I'm looking at new gear, if I go from this level of hardware up to this level, what's the real return for me on that? And what I mean by that is that if the kinds of, let's say, renders I am doing to render frames for a piece of video work, if it's now taking me 5 minutes and I double my speed to 2.5 minutes, does that make any functional difference in how I work? Now, if it's taking 3 hours and I can knock that down to 1 hour, that is a significant time savings and my productivity will rationally go up. I can get more work done easier and get it out faster. But those are the intangibles, and it just really depends. You know, I've seen people buy way bigger powered computers than they actually need. And I've also seen people think they can get away with underpowered computers, and they're constantly frustrated. And this is why it's so important to match, figure out what's the delta between the hardware that you're operating and the tasks you need it to do, and try to right-size things. Having said all that, bigger, faster computers never make anybody sad if they can afford to put them on the desktop. And if you can risk the finances that it takes to buy the big, fast stuff, go for it, because you're not going to be unhappy having a bigger, faster computer in this world.
Jason?
Let me start by saying I own just about everything that you're upgrading into, and it is great. So, the modern Macs are going to be able to do pretty much anything that you need them to do, short of insane professional, switching at the Olympics type work. That said, the most expensive thing you can do with an Apple computer is make it portable. So I wouldn't start with a MacBook Pro if your explicit use is in-house audio video work. That's not the best way to spend your money. That said, I love my several $1,000 MacBook Pro. It's just you can do a lot more with a mini, and they are far more functional, per dollar.
Yeah, definitely a bang for the buck consideration. If you're, depending on how much or how often or frequently you want to upgrade that system, if all you're doing is, if you're not doing a lot of post heavy or graphic, like 3D graphic heavy stuff in that studio, you might start to see some diminishing returns as you go to the beefier and beefier studios. I know that even on this show, there's a lot of M1 Mac Minis that are not necessarily the most souped up things in the world, that are still helping run this show, and they're part of that production pipeline. So you got to think about, are you trying to be live or are you trying to be in post? Is it video work? Is it audio work? Is it a lot of 3D stuff? The other thing that I would say is how valuable is time to you? Really think about, how much time am I saving by going with one of these solutions that is more powerful? And when I add that extra compute, am I saving time? Am I saving render time? If I save myself 5 hours a week, at what point do I start to see a return on the additional investment? Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm going to support what you're saying here. And I was talking to Mickey not long ago because, as you know, I do audiobooks, and I just finished one, and I was rendering it out. And he said, well, how long did it take to do it? I hadn't really looked at it, at the actual stats to how long it took me to export this 9-hour audio presentation. And he has built me a nice processing stack that really helps me mastering the book. But it's very complex. It has multiple instances of filtering and things like that to go on and take care of problems, and also to just make things sound and get all the levels exactly right. So I misspoke when he said, how long did it take? And I said, gosh, I think it only took like 5 or 10 minutes to run the stack against it. I was wrong. It took like 30 minutes. And between 30 and 40 minutes, depending on one particular effect I had and things that took longer to run. And I was thinking to myself, well, that's on the edge for me of, should I have bigger hardware? Because I'm rendering this on my laptop. And I said to myself, wait a second, I have worked for 3 months on this project. I have 8 hours of content. Why am I quibbling with myself the fact that I'm going to be 30 or 40 minutes to master it for export? Is that really significant? In the wide range of things, if I was a production house and I had to get out of 5 books a day, you bet that's significant. But for me, doing one book every 2 months or month and a half, or having even multiple 2 or 3 books going at the same time, that is not a significant productivity constraint. At least it doesn't feel like it for me. So I'm not going to try to do it with a different machine because this one's working just fine for it.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. Panelists, it's awesome to get to hang out with you on Thursday morning, see some faces I'm not always on the panel with, so it's exciting. Appreciate you coming and sharing your life experience. Decades and decades of experience came here this morning to just share freely, and that's just so darn cool. Also, thank you very much to the back end for helping keeping the show going. Again, not only on the air, but also all of the support organizations around office hours to help keep us moving forward and keep us organized. It'd be impossible to do without you, so we really appreciate it. And to the producers with questions, thank you so much. We ended up having to send a couple of the questions back. So if we didn't get to your question today and you asked in Makana, it'll be in your notes and you can submit it the next time you're watching. If it was a QR code question, it's still in the hopper, so we'll filter that in tomorrow or Monday or something like that. We would have to walk around and go from place to place to ask all these questions and get all these answers today. We'd wind up with the Tualack Traversal, and that today is 52,000 miles, 83,000 kilometers, 410 million bananas for scale. See you in after hours.
Banana jump cut.
I'm sorry, I should have noted that we were at the top of the hour and shortened my answer.
No, you're good. Major development on Macintosh or infinitemac.org that I went to earlier. So now they actually have a link where you can load older CDs and software from Macintosh Garden directly onto the machine that you're emulating in the browser window.
It's so easy to tell, like, where the cutoff is, like where Apple stops suing people.
Like, just nostalgia abound. So I don't know. I may lose an afternoon on Saturday to this. We'll see.
You're going to play in old OSs, huh?
There was this, Westward Ho or Eric Solitaire.
You're going to run Zork on something, aren't you?
Oregon Trail. I mean, you're going to die of diphtheria or tetanus or